Yeah, the Earth is in a terrible mess, and it's my fault, my generation's fault, and the generation before, the boomers, with their deforestation and their fossil fuels, ruining the ozone layer, raising the temperature by a few degrees, so parasites, bacteria, and these zootropic pandemics are just going to get worse and worse. Like, if you're 20 years old now, you're going to have a very different middle age to me. I've had the best 60 years of civilization, right? But if you're 20 now, in 40 years' time, you're going to be in your house, wearing a mask, crying. Like you do now over jokes. And I'm not going to be around to see that, but I am going to spend my entire fortune from now on private jets to make sure it definitely fucking happens. We're going to be the first generation that future generations are jealous of, right? Usually you look back in history and you feel sorry for it. You go, oh, no indoor toilets. I've got 9 toilets in my house. And sometimes I just run around flushing them for a laugh. Just so that...
Good morning. It's Thursday, Delta Force Thursday, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have news shorts, patriotic shorts, motivation shorts, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Inside Delta Force. All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, the news shorts.
The U.S. military response to this past weekend's deadly drone attack in Jordan is now becoming more clear.
CBS News has learned that the Biden administration has approved plans to launch a series of strikes on targets in Iraq and Syria. The U.S. says an umbrella group of Iran-backed militias known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq is behind the attack. Iran has threatened to decisively respond to any U.S. strikes. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin took questions from reporters about the Pentagon's plans for the first time since he was hospitalized for prostate cancer.
This is a dangerous moment in the Middle East. We will continue to work to avoid a wider conflict in the region. But we will take all necessary actions to defend the United States, our interest, and our people. And we will respond when we choose, where we choose, and how we choose.
CBS News national security correspondent David Martin joins us now from the Pentagon. David, we'll talk about what really was an extraordinary news conference this morning in a moment. But first, let's get to the military headline. What are we learning about the U.S. response in the Middle East to that weekend drone attack?
Well, the plans call for a series of strikes that would take place over a number of days against targets in Iraq and Syria that would include the militias which have been carrying out these attacks against U.S. troop locations and the Iranian facilities and personnel who have been supporting the militias and really are the ones who make these attacks possible. Now, the timing of these strikes is going to depend on weather and intelligence. Weather because pilots want to have eyes on their targets. Intelligence because these strikes have been well telegraphed. At the beginning of the week, the president said publicly he has decided on what his response will be. And some of these Iranian operatives that the U.S. is looking for, they heard that as well. And so they've had time to either go to ground or get out of the country entirely. So we can't be certain when the weather and the intelligence will come together.
It's very disruptive to raise your children on a sinking ship. And if you don't think Canada's a sinking ship, you're an idiot. We now make less per capita than people in Mississippi. We're worse off than the people in the worst off state in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's a race to the bottom. The OECD predicts that we'll be the worst performing country in the developed world for the next 3 decades. Yeah. Well, if you're a Canadian and you think the Charter of Rights protects your rights, you're a fool. That thing isn't worth the paper it's written on. You don't have property rights to any real significant degree. You certainly don't have the right to free speech, especially if you're a professional. The Canadians who are silent when their conscience is telling them to speak should pray that they die before the full consequences of their stupidity make themselves manifest. But they'll have their children to suffer. Their children can suffer for them, because that's the consequences of silence. And you said erosion of freedom. It's like, no, we should make it more stark than that. Canadians do not understand this. Their freedoms are already gone. What we have is the remnants of freedoms. We have the echoes and ghosts of freedoms. We have the apparatus of freedom. The freedoms are already gone. And now the consequences of that are going to unfold. Now, you can already see that happening in Canada's economic decline, but it's certainly not going to stop there. And, it's very hard for Canadians, because we are accustomed to assuming that our fundamental institutions are sound, and they were for a long time. You could trust that the political parties essentially stood for what they said they stood for. Exactly. And what's happened is that the spirit of tyranny has determined how to invade low-level bureaucracies and exert itself. We're protected to some degree against tyranny at the highest levels of the political, but we're not protected at all against creeping tyranny in the administrative state. And especially when the judiciary enables precisely those actors. And they are not responsible to the market as you are if you're a evil capitalist, and they're not responsible to, in any real sense, to the electorate.
Mr. Foster, first thing, let me say, do not make any statement. Anything you say can be used against you.
Jameer Foster, Zakuria Blackwell, and John Morrison each appeared over video, facing not only the judge, but also Police Chief Thompson, Mayor Nancy Vaughn, dozens of officers, and the widow of Sergeant Philip Dale Nix. Jameer Foster appeared first and is facing the heaviest possible sentence.
You're also charged with first-degree murder that carries the maximum sentence of the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Prompting a reaction from him, Judge Tabitha Holliday quickly put down.
This is just a horrible, horrible thing. So don't say anything else. Please don't say anything else.
U.S. military forces conducting self-defense strikes in Yemen overnight against 10 unmanned Houthi drones and a ground control station.
Our goal is to make sure that we continue to take away capability from the Houthis to do what they've been doing.
According to CENTCOM, the drones and the ground control station presented an imminent threat to commercial and naval ships in the region. Hours before the strike, the USS Carney shooting down an anti-ship ballistic missile fired by Houthi militants, in addition to 3 Iranian drones in less than an hour. All this after the USS Gravely intercepted a Houthi missile heading toward the ship, splashing into the sea within only 1 mile of the warship, the closest call yet. And now, all eyes on the U.S. as the Pentagon prepares to retaliate for the attack in Jordan that killed 3 American soldiers, wounding 47 others. For the first time, the White House naming and blaming the Iran-backed militant group Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an umbrella group of numerous militias, for the attack. Defense officials say the military is preparing for a multi-day, multi-target campaign bigger than anything seen so far.
We will respond when we choose, where we choose, and how we choose.
Thursday morning at the National Prayer Breakfast, President Biden paying tribute to the fallen and injured in the attack.
They've raised their lives in harm's way. They risked it all. And we'll never forget the sacrifices and service to our country that the dozens of service members who were wounded and is recovering now.
And the president will be attending the dignified transfer ceremony at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware tomorrow, where the 3 U.S. reservists killed in Jordan will be honored. Ika Jachi, ABC News, Washington.
The European Union has just reached an agreement to offer Ukraine 50 billion euros to fund its war against Russia.
The council president says all 27 EU nations voted to approve the package, bringing Hungary on board after the country's prime minister had threatened to veto it. Meanwhile, a $100 billion aid package from the U.S. is being held up in Congress.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's my pleasure to welcome Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III to the Pentagon briefing room. The Secretary will deliver opening remarks and then take your questions. Please note that I will moderate those questions and call on journalists, so I'd ask that you raise your hand. If you have a question, wait to be recognized, and I'll call upon you. With that, over to you, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, Pat. Good morning. It's been a difficult few days for the Department of Defense, and the entire department is united in our outrage and sorrow over the death of 3 U.S. service members on Sunday in Jordan. We all mourn the loss of 3 Army Reserve soldiers serving at Tower 22. Sergeant William J. Rivers, age 46, Sergeant Kennedy L. Sanders, age 24, and Sergeant Brianna A. Moffitt, age 23. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families and their loved ones, and we know that this grief will never leave them. And we hope that they know that the department's love and support will never leave them either. We're also praying for the other American troops who were wounded. Now, our teammates were killed when a one-way attack drone struck their living quarters, and we continue to gather the facts about this deadly attack. Our fallen soldiers had a vital mission to support Operation Inherent Resolve and to work with our partners to ensure the lasting defeat of ISIS. They risked their lives and lost their lives to keep their fellow Americans safe from global terrorism. The president will not tolerate attacks on American troops, and neither will I. Our teammates were killed by radical militias backed by Iran and operating inside Syria and Iraq. In the aftermath of the vile Hamas terrorist assault on Israel on October 7th, terrorist groups backed by Iran and funded by Iran have tried to create even more turmoil, including the Houthis attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea. So this is a dangerous moment in the Middle East. We will continue to work to avoid a wider conflict in the region, but we will take all necessary actions to defend the United States, our interests, and our people. And we will respond when we choose, where we choose, and how we choose.
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now is the military or patriotic shorts, contrary to what we just got done with. What we just got done with was the news shorts.
I lived directly across the hall from the acting boss of the Bonanno crime family, and he and I just hit it off. They had a crooked guard on the payroll who would bring in, oh my God, pork loin, fresh mozzarella, tomatoes, and mushrooms, and white wine for the marsala sauce. I gained 35 pounds in prison. There was one guy in particular that was the cook. He was my best friend in prison. What you do is you fill a garbage can with water halfway, and then take a live electrical wire. You put it in the water, it goes, and next thing you know, the water's boiling. Then you take a plastic garbage bag, you put all your stuff in it, you poke holes in it, and you put it above the boiling water so it steams everything. And then you add spices and sauces and all kinds of stuff. And it's magnificent.
How does Russia practice for U.S. fighters? They use a special method that could put them ahead of the United States Air Force. Let me explain. Back in the early 1970s, the Soviet Air Force heard that the U.S. had these new special teams. called aggressor squadrons. These squads copied Soviet plane tactics to help train American pilots for aerial combat. So the Soviets decided they needed their own aggressor unit, but they did it in a completely different way. First, to compete with new U.S. planes like the F-15 and F-16, the Soviet squadron went for the MiG-29 and MiG-23 fighters for their drills. But there was one big problem. During training dogfights, pilots couldn't always tell who was on their team, especially if they all flew the same type of plane. So that's when they had an idea to paint the MiGs with special markings and nose art. However, they painted them to look like F-15s. The wingtips and stabilator tips got painted yellow with a black outline. And on top of the F-15 disguise, they also added nose art. Each aggressor MiG got a shark mouth.
It's been frequently noted that a brotherhood is forged from the irons of war. A band of brothers, as it's been famously called. Unbreakable bonds born of duty, anguish, valor, and dedication. Well, Jesse Brown and Thomas Hudner personify it. Jesse Brown was the second African-American naval aviator in history. On December 4th, 1950, his Corsair was shot down in the mountains of North Korea near Chosin Reservoir. His wingman, Thomas Hudner, intentionally crashed his plane to rescue Jesse, but Jesse's injuries were too severe and he didn't make it. Hudner, who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions, said of his friend at the commissioning of the USS Jesse Brown in 1973, "He died with courage and unfathomable dignity. He willingly gave his life to tear down barriers to freedom of others." Jesse Brown was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Their story was immortalized in the 2022 film Devotion.
It's being speculated that the U.S. will sink at least part of Iran's navy. And the response is reportedly going to be a several weeks-long bombing campaign that will include Iranian targets outside of Iran. And this will reportedly include cyber attacks in addition to the already assumed explosions. With the White House saying that the first thing you see won't be the last. Meanwhile, Iran said that attacking them will mean war. And after that, the U.S. said it probably wouldn't attack Iran directly. So Iran changed their stance to any attack on their stuff outside of Iran will mean war. But also, Iran has privately communicated to the U.S. that they don't actually want a war, and the U.S. told them they also don't want a war. So now the war is off and everything is cool. It's not. Because Iran denies ever privately talking to the U.S. and says that America will pay if it hits Iran or its assets. And as for yesterday's surrender and the rumors of other groups doing the same, the U.S. said it doesn't care what Iran's puppets say, but rather what they do, and they attacked our soldiers and they'll pay for that. Meanwhile, the Houthis tried to fire an anti-air missile at the U.S. today, but the U.S. destroyed it before they could. They also fired a cruise missile at a U.S. destroyer, and it got within a mile of it before being shot down by the ship's gun, essentially its last defense. But hey, all of this is still developing, so follow and share to stay in the loop.
Our station chief, Dick Welch, was assassinated in 1975. Dick and his wife had gone to the ambassador's Christmas party, and then they left the Christmas party. They drove back to the house in a close-in, very high-end suburb called Psijico, and those were the days before automatic gates. So their driver pulls up to the gate, and he puts the car in park, and he gets out to open the gate. When he did that, two people got out of a car parked across the street. Both of them had guns. One was a .45 that has become known as the Welch 45, and a .38 revolver. And one of the men shouts, "Richard Welch, get out of the car." Dick gets out with his wife, and one of them says, "Richard Welch, you have been convicted of crimes against the Greek people, and you have been sentenced to death," and shoots him 3 times in the chest. They calmly get back in the car and drive away.
The SR-72 Dark Star will finally have its debut flight this year. Let me explain. This is the SR-72, known as the son of the Blackbird. First announced by Lockheed Martin in 2013, this aircraft is much better than the iconic SR-71. With the new advanced technology, the SR-72 will be capable of reaching speeds of up to Mach 6, or 4,000 miles per hour, and reach heights of up to 80,000 feet, which is triple the height of Mount Everest. This amount of speed and power means the Dark Star can reach anywhere in the world within an hour, taking recon missions to a whole new level. But it's powered by an all-new hybrid jet and rocket engine. This insane technology uses a system called a turbine-based combined cycle, meaning the jet can switch between a turbine engine for slower speeds and a scramjet engine to reach supersonic speeds. In 2018, Lockheed Martin executives hinted at a potential SR-72 test flight by 2025.
I was heavily armed all the time. What did you carry? I had carried a 9mm Glock in a fanny pack on my waist and a snub-nose .38 revolver on my ankle. I carried 2 extra magazines in my fanny pack. It was a tearaway, so it was quick action. And then, just in case, I kept a buck knife in my pocket. You know, I even remember going to church with my wife and kids one Sunday and asking God to forgive me for taking all these weapons into church. But I was literally never without them.
What led a Navy F-14 to shoot down an Air Force RF-4 Phantom in 1987? The tragic incident happened during a NATO war game in which Air Force aggressors were to carry out simulated attacks against the USS Saratoga, while Navy F-14s attempted to intercept them. But just before this particular F-14 pilot took off, he was told the mission had changed, which struck him as odd. Following the new vector, he soon spotted an RF-4 Phantom refueling from a KC-135 tanker. And this is where things got strange. Because when the Phantom finished refueling and headed toward the Saratoga, the F-14 pilot asked for his weapon status, and when told he was red and free, he believed they were telling him to fire a live missile. So when the AIM-9 Sidewinder detached from the rail and exploded into the back of the Phantom, it was no simulation. The Phantom went down 5 miles from the Saratoga, and although the crew survived, the pilot suffered back injuries for the rest of his life. All because of a tragic mistake.
The siege of Bastogne was his very first engagement. He was just 19 and a member of the legendary 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. His name was Vincent Speranza, and when his wounded buddy Joe Willis jokingly asked him for a drink, Speranza took the request to heart. Speranza scoured Bastogne and came across a bombed-out pub with a working tap. He filled his helmet with beer and delivered it to Willis. Soon, other wounded soldiers asked for beer. Speranza dodged snipers on multiple runs until a horrified medic put an end to it. Beer could kill some of the wounded, he scolded a surprised Speranza, who returned his soggy helmet to his head, beer dripping down his face. In 2016, Speranza visited Bastogne and was shocked to learn that a local pub was selling GI beer delivered in a ceramic helmet. He was a legend to the locals. Vincent Speranza died in 2023 at the age of 98.
What happens if a Russian fighter jet enters U.S. airspace? Let me explain. Near the end of the Cold War, a giant 4-engine Russian spy plane was about to run out of fuel and had to land on an Alaskan lake. The U.S. Air Force responded immediately. They airlifted fuel drums to refuel the stranded plane so that it could head back to Russia, even though the Russian crew were nervous to get refueled. They just wanted their plane out of the country, and the U.S. luckily wanted the same. However, in another incident, things were different. Canadian Air Force pilots intercepted Russian aircrafts heading into Canadian airspace. They were a big threat, and they had to respond quickly. So they gave them a nice wave, an escort out of the country, and sent them home. But it was like a training exercise for the Canadians. Having faced off against Russian planes multiple times, they were unfazed and saw it as routine. Except today, relations are a little different. If a foreign military jet went into American airspace, what do you think would happen?
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the motivational shorts.
You write in the book, there is no faith and no courage and no sacrifice in doing what is expedient. What do you say to those viewers that don't pursue their dreams and are locked in their careers because they are too afraid to take risks and pursue something meaningful?
Well, the first thing I would say is, well, you should be afraid of taking risks and pursuing something meaningful. But you should be more afraid of staying where you are if it's making you miserable. You're paying a price by sitting there being miserable. You might say, well, the devil I know is better than the one I don't. It's like, don't be so sure of that. The clock is ticking. Yeah, and if you're miserable in your job now and you change nothing, in 5 years you'll be much more miserable and you'll be a lot older.
But isn't it a luxury to pursue what is meaningful? Our viewers have mortgages, they have children, they have payments and loans. It's a luxury to pursue because we lack the resources.
Well, I don't remember now, I'm not talking about what makes you happy. It's a luxury to pursue what makes you happy. It's a moral obligation to pursue what you find meaningful. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It might require sacrifice. If you need to change your job too, let's say you have a family and children and a mortgage, you have responsibilities. You've already picked up those responsibilities. You don't just get to walk away scot-free and say, well, I don't like my job, I quit. That's no strategy. But what you might have to do is you think, well, this job is killing my soul. All right, so what do I have to do about that? Well, I have to look for another job. Well, no one wants to hire me. It's like, okay, maybe you need to educate yourself more. Maybe you need to update your curriculum vitae, your resume. Maybe you need to overcome your fear of being interviewed. Maybe you need to sharpen your social skills. Like, you have to think about these things strategically. If you're going to switch careers, you have to do it like an intelligent, responsible person. That might take you a couple of years of effort to do properly.
We're built for struggle, us human beings. We're built to contend with the world. We're built to contend with reality. You want a challenge, and the best way that you can take on a challenge, because a challenge fortifies you. So you don't want to be secure, you want to be strong. And you get strong by taking on optimal challenges. And so you lay out your destiny in the world, and you take the slings and arrows of fate, and you make yourself stronger while you're doing so. And you might fail, and fortune might do you in. But it's your best bet. And, you know, people have extracted unbelievable successes out of catastrophic failures. And I'm not saying that in a naive way. I know perfectly well what happens to people. You know, you're doing fine in life and then you get cancer. And then 6 months later, you're dead. And all the heroism in the world isn't going to save you at that point. But that's not the point. That's not the point. Life is bounded by mortality, but that doesn't mean that you don't get out there and contend, and you develop by contending, and you minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. And that's something, man. That's something to do.
First started telling jokes, I made $25 a night. The first year in comedy, I made $3,000. Second year, I made $5,500. The third year, I made about $7,200. I became homeless. You make 3, 5, and 7. $15,000 in 3 years. That's how you get homeless. I lived in a car for 3 years because I wasn't making enough money. But guess what? I kept telling them $25 jokes until they started paying me $250 a night. I kept telling them $250 jokes, started paying me $25,000 a night. I kept telling them $25,000 jokes until they started paying me $75,000 a night. They done paid me $500,000 for these jokes. Without the kings of comedy, we made $58 million in 1 year. You know what we did? We told jokes. Them the same $25 jokes. They ain't nothing but English. I just kept repetition over and over and over. I turned them jokes into an empire. I turned them jokes into a lifestyle beyond my wildest dreams. I turned them jokes into funds. My grandkids ain't got to worry about nothing. I done put up so much with them $25 jokes. You are sitting on an empire. You are worth millions. That's how you become a millionaire. You don't try to think of a million. You just do this $10 thing you got over and over and over. You're sitting on money, man. That's how you get rich. Quit trying to figure out how to make a million. Take something, a $10 idea, and just do it. And do it. And keep praying about it. Keep asking God to show you the next level. Keep asking God for strength when it looks like you ain't gonna make it. When I was homeless, it looked like I wasn't gonna make it. I kept praying about it. Kept asking God to come get me. I kept leaning on my mama. Man, she said, he didn't bring you this far to leave me. I kept hearing her say that. You know, I could have gave up a long time ago, but I never gave up. I just kept fighting. God is going to come through and do what he say he going to do, but you got to give him something to work with. If you do that, God will change your whole life. I dare you to try it. I dare you to take your gift and do it over and over and over. Watch what he do. The Bible says your gift will make room for you and put you in the presence of great men. Don't say nothing about your passion or your education. Your gift. If you do that, God will change your life.
When I wake up in the morning, I don't think, am I motivated to go do what I'm supposed to do? No, I don't think about it for 1 millisecond. When the alarm clock goes off, I have no thought about whether this is easy, whether this is hard, whether I want to do it, whether I don't want to do it. None of that matters. It's an emotionless, thoughtless discipline. When the alarm clock goes off, you get up, you get out of bed, and you go do what you're supposed to do. I don't care how it feels.
Every day, I don't feel like doing things that I still do. It's called discipline. It's not about feeling like doing it.
You don't feel like going through that on a Wednesday morning when you wake up, and you have to do it because you're disciplined. You're either a disciplined individual or you are not a disciplined individual. I do not need to be motivated. I'm a disciplined person. If I allocate X amount of time to work, I'm going to do it. You're going to have to work when you don't feel like working.
Every fucking day I wake up and I don't want to do some shit. You have to learn how to get up and do shit when you ain't got no fucking 5K, no 10K. Nothing exists. Your life fucking sucks. You're in the fucking dungeon. But guess what? I'm still going to get it.
Your feelings don't matter. That's the deal. You may feel like doing something, maybe you don't feel like doing something. Doesn't matter. Get out there and do what you're supposed to do, whether you feel like it or not.
You have to learn to perform without motivation.
Motivation is a feeling that comes and goes, and it doesn't matter whether it's there or not. Discipline is infinitely more important. So no matter how you feel, get up and do what you're supposed to do.
It's a commitment. It's not a feeling. Commitments don't have nothing to do with your feelings. You do it because you're supposed to.
It's a lifestyle. Instead of hitting that snooze button in the fucking morning and not making your bed and not cleaning your house, you don't hit the snooze button. You get up. You don't want to go run, you go run. You don't want to make your bed, you make your bed. You don't want to study, you fucking study. That's how you start to callous your mind. It's going to suck. It's not going to be fun. Do something that sucks every single day of your life. That's how you grow. You have to learn to perform without purpose. You have to learn to perform a lot of different things. And that's what people think. They think I need to have this motivation to work out, to study, to be better. So if they don't have it, they just don't fucking do it. And that's where you fail. You have to learn to train your mind well beyond motivation. It's so easy to be great nowadays, my friend, because most people are weak. Most people don't want to go to that extra mile. Most people don't want to find that extra because it sucks. It's miserable. It's lonely.
I don't care how good you are in anything. You don't have discipline. You ain't nobody. Nothing. Because you give up in the slightest struggle without discipline. I mean, discipline is doing what you hate to do, but do it like you love it.
You have to be willing to grit it out. You have to be willing to push through discomfort. Nothing that you're about to try or do that is worthwhile is going to be comfortable for you during the process of creating it. Stop with this hope, stop with this I wish, and start replacing those terms with I will fucking do, no matter what.
And that was the Motivational Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the daily laws for February the 1st.
February 1st. Submit to reality. We receive 3 educations, one from our parents, one from our schoolmasters, and one from the world. The third contradicts all that the first 2 teach us. Barron de Montesquieu. After your formal education, you enter the most critical phase in your life, a practical education known as the apprenticeship. Every time you change careers or acquire new skills, you re-enter this phase of life. The goal of the apprenticeship is not to make money. It's not to get fame or to get attention or to get some cushy position with a nice title. The goal of an apprenticeship is to literally transform yourself. You enter the apprenticeship as someone who's essentially naive. We all do. You're someone who doesn't yet have the skills that are necessary. You're probably someone who's a little bit impatient. And in the end, you are going to transform yourself into someone who's skilled, who's realistic, who understands the political nature of people, and who learns the rules that govern your field. You're going to develop patience and a solid work ethic. I call it reality. The reality is, in your field, for hundreds of years, people have been devising rules, procedures, and practices that have been passed through tradition. Medicine would be an easy example, but it pertains to every field. These rules and procedures represent reality, and you don't have any connection to it when you first enter the field. Your goal is literally to submit. In the deepest sense of the word, you submit to this reality. You recognize that you're starting over, and you're going to immerse yourself in it, so that eventually you're going to be the one who actually rewrites those rules, like all masters do. Daily law. Learning how to learn is the most important skill to acquire. Robert Greene, Full Address on Mastery to the Oxford Union Society, December 12, 2012.
And that was the Daily Law for February the 1st from the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
At the heart of evangelization, everybody, is this. It's sharing an experience of the power of Christ. If it's just arguments, that can strike people as empty words. Rather, the greatest evangelist is the one who says, I've been healed by my contact with this Jesus, and now I want you to have the same experience.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, what is the nature of a creature in which the sight of a value arouses hatred and the desire to destroy? In the most profound sense of the term, such a creature is a killer, not a physical, but a metaphysical one. It is not an enemy of your values, but of all values. It is an enemy of anything that enables man to survive. It is an enemy of life as such and of everything living. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. And thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
From the age of 3, he could see in his mind's eye the role he would play when he was 30. From Aristotle, he learned the power of controlling his emotions, seeing things dispassionately, thinking ahead to the consequences of his actions. Trace the zigzags of Alexander's maneuvers, and you will see their grand strategic consistency. His quick actions against first Thebes, then Persia, worked psychically on his soldiers and on his critics. Nothing quiets an army faster than battle. Alexander's sudden crusade against the hated Persians was the perfect way to unite the Greeks. Once he was in Persia, though, speed was the wrong tactic. Had Alexander advanced, he would have found himself controlling too much land too quickly. Running it would have exhausted his resources, and in the ensuing power vacuum, enemies would have sprung up everywhere. Better to proceed slowly, to build on what was there, to win hearts and minds. Instead of wasting money on building a navy, better simply to make the Persian navy unusable. To pay for the kind of extended campaign that would bring long-term success, first seize the rich lands of Egypt. None of Alexander's actions were wasted. Those who saw his plans bear fruit in ways they themselves had been entirely unable to predict thought him a kind of god. And certainly his control over events deep in the future seemed more godlike than human. To become a grand strategist in life, you must follow the path of Alexander. First, clarify your life, decipher your own personal riddle by determining what it is you are destined to achieve, the direction in which your skills and talents seem to push you. Visualize yourself fulfilling this destiny in glorious detail. As Aristotle advised, work to master your emotions and train yourself to think ahead. This action will advance me toward my goal. This one will lead me nowhere. Guided by these standards, you will be able to stay on course. Ignore the conventional wisdom about what you should or should not be doing. It may make sense for some, but that does not mean it bears any relation to your own goals and destiny. You need to be patient enough to plot several steps ahead, to wage a campaign instead of fighting battles. The path to your goal may be indirect. Your actions may be strange to other people, but so much the better. The less they understand you, the easier they are to deceive, manipulate, and seduce. Following this path, you will gain the calm, Olympian perspective that will separate you from other mortals, whether dreamers who get nothing done or prosaic, practical people who accomplish only small things. By Napoleon Bonaparte. What I particularly admire in Alexander is not so much his campaigns, but his political sense. He possessed the art of winning the affection of the people. Total warfare. In 1967, the leaders of the American war effort in Vietnam thought they were finally making progress. They had launched a series of operations to search out and destroy the Viet Cong, North Vietnamese soldiers who had infiltrated South Vietnam and had come to control much of its countryside. These guerrilla fighters were elusive, but the Americans had inflicted heavy losses on them in the few battles they had managed to force on them that year. The new South Vietnamese government, supported by the Americans, seemed relatively stable, which could help to win it approval among the Vietnamese people. To the north, bombing raids had knocked out many of North Vietnam's airfields and heavily damaged its air force. Although massive anti-war demonstrations had broken out in the United States, polls showed that most Americans supported the war and believed that the end was in sight. Since the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army had proved rather ineffective in head-to-head battle against the might of American firepower and technology, the strategy was to somehow lure them into a major engagement. That would be the turning point of the war. And by the end of 1967, intelligence indicated that the North Vietnamese were about to fall into just such a trap. Their commander, General Von Nguyen Giap, was planning a major offensive against the U.S. Marine outpost at Khe Sanh. Apparently, he wanted to repeat his greatest success, the battle at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, in which he had defeated the French army, driving the French out of Vietnam for good. Khe Sanh was a key strategic outpost. It was located a mere 14 miles from the demilitarized zone that separated North from South Vietnam. It was also 6 miles from the border of Laos, site of a stretch of the famous Ho Chi Minh Trail, the North Vietnamese supply route to the Viet Cong in the south. General William C. Westmoreland, the overall U.S. commander, was using Khe Sanh to monitor enemy activity to the north and west. Dien Bien Phu had served a similar role for the French, and Giap had been able to isolate and destroy it. Westmoreland would not allow Giap to repeat that feat. He built well-protected airstrips around Khe Sanh, ensuring full use of his helicopters and control of the air. He called up substantial numbers of troops from the south to the Khe Sanh area, just in case he needed them. He also ordered 6,000 additional Marines to reinforce the outpost. But a major attack on Khe Sanh was nothing he wanted to discourage. In frontal battle, the enemy would finally expose itself to severe defeat. In the first few weeks of 1968, all eyes were on Khe Sanh. The White House and the U.S. media were certain that the decisive battle of the war was about to begin. Finally, at dawn on January 21, 1968, the North Vietnamese army launched a vicious assault. As both sides dug in, the battle turned into a siege. Soon after the engagement began, the Vietnamese were to celebrate their Lunar New Year, the holiday called Tet. It was a period of revelry, and in time of war, it was also a traditional moment to declare a truce. This year was no different. Both sides agreed to halt the fighting during Tet. Early on the morning of January 31st, however, the first day of the new year, reports began to trickle in from all over South Vietnam. Virtually every major town and city, as well as the most important American bases, had come under Viet Cong attack. An army general, tracking the assault pattern on a map, said it resembled a pinball machine lighting up with each raid. Parts of Saigon itself had been overrun by enemy soldiers, some of whom had managed to blow their way through the wall of the U.S. Embassy, the very symbol of the American presence in Vietnam. Marines regained control of the embassy in a bloody fight, which was widely seen on American television. The Viet Cong also attacked the city's radio station, the Presidential Palace, and Westmoreland's own compound at the Tan Son Nhut Air Base. The city quickly descended into street fighting and chaos. Outside Saigon, provincial cities too came under siege. Most prominent was the North Vietnamese capture of Hue, the ancient Vietnamese capital, and a city revered by Buddhists. Insurgents managed to take control of virtually the whole city. Meanwhile, the attacks on Khe Sanh continued in waves. It was hard for Westmoreland to tell what the main target was. Were the battles to the south merely a means of drawing forces away from Khe Sanh, or was it the other way around? Within a few weeks, in all parts of South Vietnam, the Americans regained the upper hand, retaking control of Saigon and securing their air bases. The sieges at Hue and Khe Sanh took longer, but massive artillery and air bombardments eventually doomed the insurgents, as well as leveling entire sections of Hue. After what later became known as the Tet Offensive was over, Westmoreland likened it to the Battle of the Bulge, near the end of World War II. There, the Germans had managed to surprise the Allies by staging a bold incursion into eastern France. In the first few days, they had advanced rapidly, creating panic. But once the Allies recovered, they had managed to push the Germans back, and eventually it became apparent that the battle was the German military's death knell, their last shot. So it was, Westmoreland argued, with the North Vietnamese army at Khe Sanh and the Viet Cong throughout the south. They had suffered terrible casualties, far more than the Americans had. In fact, the entire Viet Cong infrastructure had been wiped out. They would never recover. At long last, the enemy had revealed itself and had been badly mauled. The Americans thought Tet had been a tactical disaster for the North. But another viewpoint began to trickle in from home. The drama at the U.S. Embassy, the siege of Hue, and the attacks on air bases had kept millions of Americans glued to their television sets. Until then, the Viet Cong had operated mostly in the countryside, barely visible to the American public. Now, for the first time, they were apparent in major cities, wreaking havoc and destruction. Americans had been told the war was winding down and winnable. These images said otherwise.
And that was, we picked up where we left off with Chapter 12, Lose Battles But Win the War, from the 33 Strategies of War. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you need to vote Republican and become a Republican, because President Biden is not only the face of the country, the leader of the country, but he is the titular head of the Democrat Party. And what he does reflects on the Democrat Party and everybody in it. So right now, the Democrat Party is a party that wanders around not knowing where it's going, what it's doing, or what it's saying. It is brain-addled. And you, as a voter, deserve better. That's why you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you want to know what's the difference between when the government is pretending to have rights versus when is the government actually using its authority, then you ask yourself, is the government trying to prevent something? If the government is trying to prevent something, then it is exercising rights, non-existent rights. If it is responding to something, it is being moved, then it is exercising authority. And we would assume that it's exercising legitimate authority. The reason I bring this up is that today in the news in San Francisco says that there's a health crisis in San Francisco of loneliness. And so they want to spend money to prevent loneliness. And they want the governor to create a loneliness czar. This is wrong. This is an example of the government exercising non-existent rights. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Bill O'Reilly.
These other progressive things, we got to stop this now. I'm telling you, I don't have any progressive friends anymore. They're gone because I can't stomach them. Criminals running wild, murdering people because progressive DAs funded by George Soros don't want to punish the violent criminals. That's what you're giving me? You support that? Get out of my house. Out. I've had it. Biden is not going to get any better. And the Democratic Party has to get destroyed next November. I don't care whether you like Trump or not. Trump governed this nation in a responsible way where everybody prospered. And if you don't believe that, you're a moron. Every single thing, every single indicator was on positive territory. All the working people, no matter what color they were making more money and there were more jobs. We didn't have inflation. We didn't have supply problems. We didn't have any of it. Now we got all of it, in addition to an open border. These other
Anyways, he's right. This is the reason I'm playing this is because it's about time somebody said this, and it's about time he said this. He's been riding the gravy train for a long time. He's been this neutral observer and using the events of the day to write books and get rich. Now, finally, it dawns on him that if he doesn't do something, he doesn't stand up culturally, not just politically, but culturally, stand up and do something, there's not going to be any riches for him to take advantage of. Okay, and when I mean stand up culturally, he said all of his left-wing buddies and friends, all of his socialist, Democrat friends are gone. He kicked them out. Get out of the house. We all need to do that. Now, I've already done that myself. I figured that out a long time ago. I don't want to associate with people that are going to be backing idiots like President Joe Biden. I'm just not going to do it. Okay, so if that's the way you want to go, you go your way, I'll go mine. But especially stay out of my house. And I've said it before. If you have a neighbor that's like that, if you have a neighbor that, for instance, decides that they're going to trans their kid and butcher them up and put them on all kinds of medications, I'm not going to have anything to do with him. I'm going to just walk past him. I might even tell him, look, you're a scumbag, and I don't want anything to do with you. As far as I'm concerned, the only reason you're not in prison is because this isn't illegal yet. But I'm looking forward to the day that what you're doing is illegal and you go to prison. And then after that, I don't even acknowledge him. He doesn't exist. Again, be conservative, live conservative, surround yourself with conservatives. That's how we win, culturally speaking. Politically, a little bit of a different story, but culturally speaking, that's the way we win. And that's what Bill O'Reilly has finally woken up to. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, inside Delta Force, and when we left this last, the group had entered into Beirut, and their job is basically to provide security for the American ambassador in Beirut. And they were basically getting the tour of the place and getting the lay of the land, and because it's Beirut, Lebanon, and I think most of Lebanon was involved in a civil war. And there was Syrians were there was the Lebanese army, there was Druze militia, there was Muslim fighters, etc. So it was a big confusing mess. And so they were getting the brief on the lay of the land. So we're going to pick up from there on Inside Delta Force.
But I'm okay now, even if my clothes don't fit. But my advice to you, my friend, is never drink the water. We laughed as we said the refrain at the same time. As we walked the grounds, Carl filled me in on the work schedule. The guy who stays the night up here is the detail leader the next day. The limo and the follow cars spend the night here, and the lead and advance cars take the guys and go back to the embassy. They return with the detail the next morning, and the show starts all over again. Both of us work the detail all day, every day, and we rotate duties as shift leader and detail leader. As you know, the detail leader works the old man, and the shift leader handles the guys in the cars. How about the State Department guys? I asked him. What are they doing? Carl thought a few seconds before he answered. Eric, the RSO and the two ARSOs, assistant RSOs, pretty much leave us alone to run the protection. They're all good guys, but they aren't really keen on this whole thing. And besides, that's why we're here. Mike and William, the ASROs, take their turn staying the night here at Yardza. When it's a big diplomatic function somewhere, they'll step in and run the detail. Charles, the RSO, handles the administrative side of the house and lies low. You may see him once a week, and you may not. He'll show up if there is something really big going on, and the news cameras are around, but other than that, he's the invisible man. I started to make a smart comment, but before I could say anything, Carl held up a restraining hand. Eric, before you get all steamed up about the division of labor, reflect on a few things. First of all, their training or background hasn't really prepared them for the situation here, but ours has. Second, they're here for a 1-year tour of duty, and that will wear anybody down. We're each here for 75 days at a time, and as the saying goes, I could stand on my head in a bucket of shit for that long as I don't have to drink it. He grinned at me. But most important, we know how to fight when we have to and how to avoid a fight when we can. We know how to lead the locals, and we like doing it, and they like working with us. It works out for everyone, and all hands are happy. So be ready to work straight through for the next 2.5 months. No breaks and no days off. When nothing is going on and the old man stays in for the day, we can each have a few hours of downtime. But one of us is always locked and loaded and ready to roll, sort of like being on bowstring. Carl, I think you've just answered all my questions. Good, he replied. But there's one other thing I haven't told you. When you stay up here, you have the pool all to yourself. The old man hates the water and only uses it for the rare barbecue and diplomatic pool party, so it's usually all yours. Come on, let me show you. Lead the way, my man. How do I describe those next 11 weeks? Each day, each event, each incident seemed a disjointed, fleeting glimpse into some sort of kaleidoscopic and Kafkaesque vision of life. Dawn each morning, first chore of the day, sweeping spent bullets that had fallen during the night off the balcony's edge and listening to them patter into the street below. Scrawny feral cats stalking giant rodents through mounds of garbage heaped 20 feet high on the street corners. Garbage spilling into the streets, fouling whole neighborhoods with a miasmic stench. Little boys kicking a ball, using the shell of a bombed-out house as a make-do soccer field. Other little boys fishing with hand grenades from the water's edge in front of the embassy. Muffled explosions, geysers of water, young screams, pulling from the water the limp and lifeless body of a 10-year-old who had dived in too close to the fisherman. Another grenade hurled from around a street corner, skittering under our passing motorcade. A shout over the radio, a burst of speed, an explosion in the street behind us. Thank God he didn't know how to cook one off. Being shot at every single day. Sometimes randomly, sometimes by mistake, sometimes by intent. Coming to be concerned only with rocket, mortar, and artillery fire. Don't sweat the small stuff. Car tire blows out with a bang and a lurch. Heart momentarily in throat. Blowout mistaken for rocket attack. Relieved laughter all around. Syrian soldier shows a girl that he really can fire the artillery piece. Round lands on beach in Christian town of Junia. Dozens killed and wounded, mostly women and children. Next day, retaliation in Ras Beirut. Rockets slam into Summerland amusement park. Dozens killed, mostly women and children. An eye for an eye, a tragedy for a tragedy. Happy father firing AK-47 into the air in celebration of son's wedding. Hits and kills the bridegroom just as he appears on balcony with his new bride. Father kills himself in despair. Courageous man braving sniper fire to pull wounded women out of the street. Hit in the spine and paralyzed for his effort. No one will go to his aid, and the fighting swirls around him as he tries to drag his shattered body to safety. About to shoot a carload of men waving guns and trying to pass our speeding motorcade on the shoulder of the road. Stopped at last second when Mustafa yells, "They are taking wounded men to the hospital." American-built Israeli jets streaking in low over the water, thundering explosions, smoking holes where moments before living men had manned anti-aircraft positions. More bombs, more explosions. 9-story apartment complex dropped like a child's Tinker Toy building. Jets standing on their tails, hurtling straight up into the sky while spitting missile-confusing flares. Others continue bombing. Flak bursting in the sky, making small, random patterns of angry black clouds. Anti-air missiles flash through the sky, futilely chasing the deceitful flares. Finally, silence. Seconds later, the first low, keening wail of grief. A father in mindless agony, face contorted in anguish, rushing about carrying the body of his dead child in his arms. There is no place to go. There is no one who can help. He collapses in sorrow and sobs his incomprehensible torment into the crushed remains of his darling 5-year-old daughter. Long, boring days spent standing outside while meetings take place in foreign embassies, arranging meal and comfort breaks for the men, rotating guard positions, some in the sun, some in the shade, maintaining vigilance, hopeful for quiet, always ready for the worst, radio checks with the embassy, a welcome drink of cool water poured Bedouin style directly into the mouth from the spout of a communal pitcher. A favorite meal, bread, hummus, olives, mint, shish taoul, bekabali peach. Eaten with comrades late at night from the hood of a car while standing guard outside a diplomatic function. End of uneventful day, stopping in town on small errand for the old man. Caught in open on street corner in surprise artillery barrage. Shells bursting high on buildings and in the street with chest-shaking carumps. Shrapnel, masonry, flying glass rend the air. Screams, running people. 50 meters to frantic friends in engine-revving car. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Doorway to doorway. Hurry up, hurry up. Knocked flat by explosion. Feel it, never hear it. Burning car behind me. I was just there. Don't leave me. Dive into back seat across the laps of friends. Car launches forward and away. 50 meters farther around a corner and escape from hell. Check self for damage. Covered in dirt, clothes torn and shredded, scraped knees and elbows, ringing ears. Feel drunk, but no broken bones, no real blood, no injuries in the car. Huge relief, rollicking laughter. Eric, you should have seen yourself. You looked so funny running side to side with explosions all around. Then that one knocked you down and we were so scared, but you jump up again fast like the rabbit. Whose artillery? What difference does it make? Luck held out once again, almost to the embassy. A loud, happy song bursts forth. The sweet, rich joy of being alive. Good night, good night. See you tomorrow. Ba'a salama. Sudden gunfire at night. The pulsing red pop, pop, pop of muzzle flashes in the darkness. The crack, crack, crack of angry bullets. Lead and follow cars unleashing a storm of return fire. Motorcade blasts into seat-pressing dash of acceleration. Is the old man okay? Is anyone hurt? All okay. Don't stop for nothing till we get to the embassy. Ambassador in bed with the belly. A day off. Picnic in the mountains. Rich carpets over luxurious grass in the cool shade of an olive grove. Friends seated around a spread of food. Eating. Quiet laughter. Special treat. A jug of water from the sacred spring of Zamzam brought back from the Hajj. A drink for everyone. Shukran Habibi. Afternoon nap under an ancient tree. Contented snores. The brief illusion of normal life. Enjoyment of the moment. The city and the sea soft and hazy in the distance far below. It looks so peaceful and beautiful from here. If only that were true. Time to go. Farewells, hugs, kisses. Stay safe, take care, alhamdulillah. Be well, you too. I will, we will. See you again. Inshallah. Goodbye, goodbye. Ba'a salama. Airport pandemonium. No lines. Crowds of would-be passengers crush around the departure counter, shouting and waving tickets in the air. Sidestep to the diplomatic lounge. Thank God for that black passport. On the plane, wheels up, ground receding. Scotch and water, thank you very much. Overnight in Athens. Taxi ride to hotel. Puzzlement. Something peculiar? Realization. No holes in the buildings. No destruction of combat. Sit back and relax. Home soon.
And that was the end of the chapter called Aftermath, from Inside Delta Force by Eric L. Haney, Command Sergeant Major, retired. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.